Hello everyone and welcome to a new and improved version of Who Did It Better, a show where we complete the same games on different consoles to find out who did it better. Our first episode of the new season features a mascot that could never quite amount to Sonic or Mario status, no matter how hard they tried. A mascot where almost all of his games are considered meh. That's right folks, for this episode we're completing Bubsy on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. Now first off, I am aware of the Super Bubsy port on the PC that came out 2 years later, but we'll save that for another day because the amount of changes there are nuts. Released in May 1993 for the Super Nintendo and July 1993 for the Sega, Bubsy Close Encounters of the Third Kind is a 2D platformer that essentially tried to copy the essence of Sonic, but in my opinion failed miserably. The creator, Michael Berlin, played Sonic the Hedgehog for about 14 hours to get inspiration to create the Bobcat mascot. Now the game was meant to be released on Sega first, but the publishers and developers at the time, Accolade Studio, were in the middle of hashing out some legal details. So they hired a team and began working on the Super Nintendo alongside the Sega version. This is why the Sega port came out after. Now before we dive deep, let's discuss the new rules for Who Did It Better. Games must be completed now. No more looking at the first level of a game and claiming one did it better. No. We are going full deep dives into these games. The categories for the question are as follows. Gameplay and controls. This is how one game handles compared to the other. Is there noticeable lag if too many enemies are on screen? Things like that. Next up is sound. Now this is going to be a tough one because music is subjective and a lot of Sega games have that punch that the SNES doesn't have, while SNES tends to just have better sounding quality music most of the time. But what we'll try to do is be objective about it as well as take notes to different songs on different levels. After that is presentation. This is like the extra work that maybe the devs chose to do on one console and not the other. Maybe extra animations or backgrounds that move. The extra details really help flesh out some of the older games, so it needs to be acknowledged. The last rule in the series is just to have fun. This isn't some crazy analytical examination, it's just a fun way to look at older games on two completely different pieces of hardware. But if you know why something is a certain way, and you're deep in all of that, feel free to comment below. Okay, the rules are set and the opponents are ready. Let's find out who did it better. First things first, the title screens. After all, it's the first thing you see in a video game when you turn it on after the logos. The SNES wins the title screen, but just barely in my opinion. On the SNES version, Bubsy feels like he's actually bouncing towards the screen as it feels like an actual tumble. The Sega title's a tad too fast and the soundtrack is something to be desired. It sounds like most of the Bubsy music on the Sega is pretty awful, filled with a tons of beeps and boops that are not very pleasing to the ear. Here's what the songs sound like on Super Nintendo. Now the Sega. Yeah, it's like this for most of the game too. But there is some saving grace once the game actually starts. The Super Nintendo version plays like you're walking on lard with ice skates on your feet. It's like that old episode of Magic School Bus where the kids are playing baseball with no friction.
This one looks good!
A hot grounder down the third base line!
Is this baseball?
Bubsy slides around like he's looking for a new mate. This man's skating around with even the slightest button press like it's Jet Set Radio Future. It makes the game almost impossible to truly get the hang of unless you walk 1 mile an hour. Kind of the opposite of Sonic or Mario if you ask me. Also, this ain't a comparison, but what the hell is with the one-hit death from anything and everything? You fall in the water, you die. You get hit by a sewer top, you die. You hit a wooly, you die. Fall from high up enough, you die. Die. This game is wild with how hard it is considering its inspiration lets you live even if you had one ring left. But we're not here to review the game, at least not until the end. So what are some of the minor differences in these games? Well, first off, the Sega version uses yellow text for lives and time left in the level. On the SNES version, it's white. And that's about it for minor differences I can spot other than audio differences. There are some backgrounds I'll be showing as I'm just chatting through this, but majority of the differences are kind of big in a bigger way that are very, very noticeable. First off, the SNES version's power-up actually makes Bubsy turn into a silhouette, while in the Sega version, he's just transparent. It's a pretty huge difference. I mean, the SNES version just pops and gives Bubsy a little bit more character than the Sega version. Imagine you're at your bud's house and he's on the SNES version, which came out first, and you guys see the cool shadow power-up. Then you get it on Sega and you're just a blinking Bubsy. Nowhere near as cool. If you ask me, the presentation and overall aesthetics basically all go to the SNES. Better music, better visuals, better voice audio. Sega just has the better controls. Here's another example. In the final level of the game on the SNES, there's red boiling water that you have to hit some switches in order to drain. On the Sega version, it's just a basic red square that blinks over and over again. They both have the dumbest animation for when he dies in water. What is this? I mean, Bubsy throws up his hands and is celebrating that you died. Hey, you killed me, thank you. I have died because of you. Do you want a hug? I can't swim. Now I'm gonna die, thanks. Most of the bosses are the exact same, aside from the fact that on the SNES, the yarns of the UFOs are usually 2 different colors, and on the Sega, they're usually both the same. Not many differences here with that. If anything, SNES seems to do everything better except controlling Bubsy. When it comes to that department, Sega wins by a mile, and arguably that is the most important part of the game. Bubsy feels tighter, and the game flows a tad smoother. So it's hard on this one of who did it better, because one does everything right but one essential important thing, and the other does everything wrong but one essential thing. And it's the most important thing. I will argue that even though the Sega plays better, I was always looking forward to hearing and seeing the SNES presentation. So this is a tough one if I was to have a definitive who did it better, but I do want a winner. I mean, I guess you could argue that the SNES version could be mastered over time, thus making it the better version, but not by a huge margin because of how tight the controls are on the Sega. Because then you get the whole package. You get the music, you get the art, you get everything, and then you just get better at the game. But if you were someone who really cared about controls and the punchiness of actually hitting enemies, I could definitely see you going with the Sega version. The SNES just has a tad more charm behind it, and I feel like it's the better way to experience the full game. The music and animations pop a tad more with a bit more colorful palette. The Sega version, while it handles better, still handles like a Bubsy game, which means if you take fall damage or get hit once, you die. So it's like saying the Mr. Drunk Driver after 50 beers handles better than your drunk driver after 60 beers. They're both terrible and you wake up in jail. So that wraps it up for the first new and improved Who Did It Better. That game is pretty bad for something that was inspired by Sonic. It really isn't Sonic-like. When you get past the nostalgia of Bubsy, which I own both Bubsies, it's not the most fun game. Getting hit by everything forces you to move and crawl 1 inch an hour on both versions, and you gotta know what's coming ahead. So, that's not really cool. Alright, so that wraps it up for our first episode of Who Did It Better. We got the winner, and it goes to Super Nintendo. It is now 1-0. We are going to do about maybe 15 to 16 of these episodes. I'm going to be tossing them out. I'm going to try to get better at improving with them, editing them more, and just, giving you guys more visuals and stuff so you guys can look at. I hope you guys had a good time. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, all of that jazz. Leave a comment below on the next game you want to see me do on Who Did It Better. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.